Hello, fellow humans. Chris here again. Continuing the conversation, today, by the time you see this, is 20 years since 9/11. So, I, uh, I did want to do something to acknowledge it. Um, I don't necessarily want to contribute to the over sensationalizing of it that you see on TV every year. But being that it is 20 years, I kind of just wanted to take a step back and just talk a little bit about what that experience was like for me and kind of apply it to where I am today. So I was in high school. I was actually, uh, interestingly enough, I was taking U.S. history at the time that it happened, and I remember we were actually on World War II, but 9/11 obviously kind of took over that topic for a while in that class. We watched George Bush give the Oval Office speech. We talked a lot about what was happening, and um, I remember personally going through a whirlwind of emotions that as everybody was obviously at the time. Obviously sadness, grief, anger, a sense of needing accountability at the time for Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, obviously. But later on, as I became more educated, that kind of extended towards George Bush as well, for other reasons. Obviously the WMD situation, and then new information came out later that showed that he had intelligence reports a month prior, that Osama bin Laden was planning to use airplanes to attack the United States. So there was some indication that he might have been a little bit lax in his security job there. But anyway, I went through all those emotions, um, and I was happy to see the togetherness that was forming within America. It felt pretty genuine at the time. There was just an air of niceness, really. But at the same time, there was also a lot of vitriol, and our Muslim and Sikh brothers and sisters, unfortunately, faced a lot of discrimination and hate during that time as well. So it kind of brings out the good and the bad, and the ugly, in those situations. Studying World War II, learning about Japanese internment after Pearl Harbor, you think, oh well, that's crazy that happened, but that was 60 years ago, and at least we've moved past that now. But you see the way people act after something like that happens towards a certain group of people, and maybe we're not so far removed from that after all. But all that having been said, all those feelings that went on during that time, a big takeaway that I had from that, and I will refer to a very good friend of my childhood, Mr. Rogers. He was interviewed one time, and he was asked about like violence in TV, and how you sort of talk to your kids about that. And he referred to a story when he was a child. He said his mother used to tell him whenever there was anything scary on TV or in the news, some kind of big catastrophe, he would say to
Always
always
look
look
for
for
the
the helpers.
helpers. There will always be helpers, even just on the sidelines. That's why I think that if news programs could make a conscious effort of showing rescue teams, of showing who medical people, anybody who is coming into a place where there's a tragedy, to be sure that they include that. Because if you look for the helpers, you'll know that there's hope.
So always look for the helpers. That quote always got to me. Always spoke to me. I that was the thing that I noticed after 9/11. Looking at the helpers, and I look back. I think back to my childhood. I think back to growing up, and Mr. Rogers saying, "Always look for the helpers." First off, the thing is like he reminds me in a lot of ways of, he's like a hybrid of my grandparents, the ones that I grew up near close to, and really kind of a hybrid of both of them, my grandmother and grandfather, and I can see them saying that. It's just very touching. Looking for the helpers is such a poignant thing. It's literally how it sounds. Looking for the frontline workers, healthcare workers, EMTs, firefighters, all that. But on a personal level, I also see it as like a reminder about not being alone, and personal struggles that you might be going through. Look for the helpers. There's people out there that can help you, that will be there for you, even when you feel like you're at your darkest, most alone. For whatever it's worth, I extend that to you watching this right now. If you need to talk or anything like that, I'm here. Never more than a comment or two away. But I won't say that 9/11 is the reason why I joined the service, but it certainly played into it. I may have joined anyway, but it definitely played into it. I was inspired by seeing the togetherness of the nation and seeing the stepping up of the helpers. It's that hope that Mr. Rogers talked about when you look for the helpers, you'll know that there's hope. That's what I cling to through all the struggles that this nation, this world collectively is going through, both with the pandemic right now and with terrorism, wars, racial discrimination and inequality, and all the just horrible things that if you delve into them too deeply, it's pretty depressing. I mean, I touched on this a few videos back, but remembering that there's always going to be somebody there who's going to try to help with that, who's going to try to do something to make the situation better. That's always going to be there. As true as it is that progressivism dictates that it'll never be done. We're never going to solve all of the problems. There's always going to be something else that comes up. There will always be helpers in that fight. And that's what I cling to in the moments of despair about what's going on in the world, and also on a personal level. I sometimes struggle. it's good to remember that there's people out there. It's like delegation. You know, when you're a leader or a supervisor, you have to know how to delegate. You can't take on everything by yourself, or you're going to get overwhelmed. You have to know and trust your people to lend their support. So that's on this 9/11, 20 years later, that's the message I like to share more than anything is look for the helpers, be the helper, and don't be afraid to ask for help or to reach out if you need it. Don't go at it alone. And if you see a vet or a doctor or a firefighter or a police officer or anybody that has put themselves in harm's way for somebody else, let them know that you appreciate what they've done. I think it's good for everybody to acknowledge. So, anyway, I hope that everybody is safe today. My thoughts and well wishes are with all of you. Recognize that this day is traumatic for a lot of people, and you might know somebody that was involved in the attacks in some way, or you might know somebody who knows somebody who was killed in the attacks. So I hope that this day brings you peace and comfort, and that we can continue to be optimistic and hopeful about the future, even as bleak as it may look sometimes. Mr. Rogers said it best, always look for the helpers. Anyway, thank you for checking on me once again. I will be catching up with you all again very soon. Have a great rest of your day, and remember, don't be afraid to question the consensus.